psychotherapy degree. It is quite windy and incredibly slippy. So bear with me a second. I promise this will be better than how it's just done. Maybe this is some entertainment. Just trying to get through the muddy bit now, and then I'll actually begin talking about psychology versus psychotherapy. So if you've been watching a few of my videos, I've always wanted to say that, if you've been watching a few of my videos or some of my videos, you'll know that I did a psychology master's for a conversion course, and I'm currently doing a foundation year in psychotherapy and counselling, hoping to then move on to a master's in that and a postgrad certificate to then qualify as a therapist. But I thought I'd draw some comparisons between the master's degree, and then that would obviously relate to if you were to do a psychology undergraduate as well. Obviously the undergraduate would be more in depth and spread across the 3 years, compared to the master's, which was only 1 year, and then comparing that to the psychotherapy foundation year, again that's just 1 year. I'm not going to cover the master's and the postgrad certificate after that because I haven't done that yet. I haven't finished the foundation yet, but I can give a general idea of what it's been like so far and the similarities and differences. So I'm not too sure how in depth I'll go. Please let me know if you find it interesting, if any of you are particularly interested in doing, like, converting to the psychology masters, from, let's say you've done, like me, you've done an English degree at undergrad, or you've done maths degree, whatever it is, and you fancy converting to psychology, then this might be quite interesting for you. I did my master's in Exeter, so if you were looking at doing a conversion course there, I assume they'll be continuing running it in the future, then I'd assume it is quite similar as well to what I did. So yeah, basically I'll begin with the psychology degree. My first term I did biological psychology, so that was, I've been thinking about this one, I should really properly look back on what I did specifically, but it's probably my least favourite module, as I've said before. It was really interesting, but it's just not really my cup of tea. It was looking at the brain, animal behaviour, things like that. I didn't do too well at that, but yeah, it was split into 3 different lecturers and 3 different main topics, and the fact that I've forgotten one of them isn't a very good sign, so I apologise for that. But it was essentially looking at the brain and animals and all those kind of things, neuroscience-y sort of stuff. And then I won't touch on that too much because I can't give you, I'll only touch on that because I can't give you too much detail off the top of my head. I'm not very prepared. And then statistics was, obviously some of you will know what statistics is already, the dreaded module if you're doing psychology. I thought it was alright, to be fair. Again, definitely not my best module, but this really helps you for when you then end up doing the dissertation, because in the statistics module you're understanding how to work with a data set once you've collected that initial data on your participants. It will then teach you through like sample data in statistics how to actually interpret your data, how to present your data through graphs, through like charts, diagrams, whatever it is, and how to sort of translate that into something that actually makes sense to a lay person as well as a psychology person, through writing up about things like, did it have a significant difference, a significant main effect? That might not mean that much to you, it might mean a lot to you depending on whether you have a psychology background or a mathsy background. But yeah, so stats was quite dense, mathsy of course, but it was interesting. It was definitely one of those that you're thrown into first term and you're a bit like, wow, okay, is this what it's going to be like? But actually it's just very useful for then when you end up doing your dissertation, as I said. So that was that. Research methods, again, not my favourite. Another one that was in the first term, as with the other two, this was looking at sort of what is qualitative data, what's quantitative data, the difference between those. So with the former being, so with qualitative being like interviews and like more, how do I describe this? So we basically wrote an essay, and it was on how there would be interviews, and then we're collecting, based on that data, collecting and creating themes based on this study on, I can't remember what it was on now, something to do with communication, like learning communication disorder in children, and how basically picking up themes based on what each participant, each child said, and making that into something that you can write about. So that'd be more qualitative, whereas quantitative is more, you can maybe do a questionnaire, and then made that into quite clear-cut numbers and ordering and scoring based on that. And then, so yeah, you could think of one as like numbers versus the other being more words, interviews, things like that. So questionnaires versus interviews. That's a very vague and very vague description. But another part of research methods was looking at what makes like a, I suppose, what makes a good ethical piece of work. Ethical science, good psychology, these sort of things. Looking at, we wrote in the exam on like picking out a study that, you know, this could be a well-known study, and then thinking about what was ethical about it or what wasn't ethical about it, and going into detail about that. So what could be unethical is that they didn't have informed consent from the participants. They didn't, let's give an example. Maybe there's harm, psychological harm, things like that. That's just some examples off the top of my head. And then moving on to term 2, this for me was more what I thought psychology was going to be like. I probably should have known that it would also be the biology and the stats and the research methods, but psychology to me, I thought it was more this term. So term 2, we did children and young people's mental health. I did, at least. Yeah, I think everyone had to do that actually. So this was more educational. This I absolutely loved. We're looking at sort of interventions for young people, We're looking at resilience. We're looking at is mental health essentially more prevalent now than previously, looking at why, going into things such as how did COVID and lockdowns have an effect on children and young people's mental health, things like climate change, how does that affect young people's mental health, maybe social media bullying, does mental health awareness increase the prevalence because it's increasing the number of people that are actually aware of their own mental health, of course, and of the fact, I suppose they're aware, and they're also maybe feeling like it's more acceptable and taking that stigma, so destigmatizing mental health through mental health awareness. That could be campaigns, that could be posters, that could be in the school, and whether that is potentially, by increasing awareness, potentially having a negative effect through maybe over diagnosing. That's not necessarily the case, but over identifying maybe with mental health issues. And then personality and individual differences. Excuse me, sorry. Was another module. It sort of wasn't my favourite, but it's still really interesting looking at sort of like personality scales. I'm sure we've all done them on the internet, but this was actually looking at them as part of the degree and understanding the validity of these scales, understanding it's called the psychometric properties, so validity, reliability, all the different types of validity and reliability, and what makes it a good scale basically. So that was interesting, and you can kind of focus on certain topics that you're interested in. So there could be, for example, a scale on introvert versus extrovert, which I know a lot of you might have done that kind of scale, as well as other traits within that. So looking at different personality traits and how we can actually measure that through scales. Again, this module is going to be what ended up being really useful for the dissertation, because inevitably you're going to be using at least one scale, whether that's like a personality scale or like a clinical scale, so like a depression scale, for example, which is what I used. But even so, understanding the consistency, the reliability, the validity of a scale, and how to interpret that when you're reading papers that have also used it and you're using it yourself, and whether it's a good scale to use basically, and whether it's going to be able to represent your data, or not represent, but able to kind of produce findings that are desirable for you. Moving on to clinical psychology, I think this is one that everyone's quite always looks forward to. This again is what a lot of us will think about when we think of psychology. Each week we'd look at a different mental health condition, such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, PTSD, OCD, all these sort of things. And this was absolutely brilliant. We also did tutorials where this lecturer, who was absolutely amazing, would talk about CBT and we'd be looking more in depth about what CBT is, how it's an effective intervention, sort of the processes behind cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, and then how that's measured, and how that's used for intervention and all those kind of things, because CBT is arguably, but not necessarily arguably, the most researched. Doesn't mean it's the most effective, but it's the most researched, and therefore in terms of research, it's like one of the most effective interventions for various mental health conditions. And then so we ended up writing an essay on a topic of our choice, and I think, I can't remember exactly, but anyway, I wrote about CBT and whether CBT was an effective intervention for OCD. I looked specifically at exposure response prevention, so ERP, which is sort of like a, I guess like almost a subsection, like a type of CBT. That was really, really cool to research. I really enjoyed that. Just to go back to no, I don't need to go back, because I think I explained enough. Well, within children and young people's mental health, we also looked at mental health conditions, so things like ADHD and autism in children and young people, and then we'd write an essay on a particular learning difficulty, like one of those, or developmental, and that'd be really interesting. I was going to go into more depth, but I want to carry on, and I can't really remember off the top of my head, but I thought I'd raise that because it's quite cool. And then so then the clinical psychology exam would be answering questions on the theory and then the more practical side of looking at mental health conditions and answering questions on that, answering questions based on your understanding of these mental health conditions, the symptoms, the treatment, intervention, etc. You get the gist. And then the final one before the dissertation was social psychology. This was, this is quite long already, I haven't even gotten to psychotherapy. Social psychology, we looked at, did an exam, and we looked throughout the term on things like conformity, compliance, social influence, social identity, minority influence, gender, all these kind of topics that you might expect in social psychology. Can't walk back now, I'm trying not to slip. I actually might walk back again because I've got a bit of time. Good to go back. And then sort of like altruism, bystander effect, all these things. I won't go into too much depth, but just kind of touching on some of the things that you might look at if you did a master's in psychology. And then we wrote an essay, and again we were using the research methods and skills from stats and stuff to interpret data, a data set that had already been, not a pre-existing data set, but then we'd have to interpret it and get results from it, basically. And we're looking at essentially the theories behind women in leadership and women being able to get into leadership, and sort of barriers that they face we're trying to get into leadership. So looking at the glass ceiling, the glass cliff, so the social identity theory, things like this. So and prototypicality, all these kind of things. So what's preventing women from A, being able to get into those positions, and B, being able to sort of maintain those positions, and the social psychology behind that. So yeah, I won't go into too much about that, but that was really interesting as well. And then the dissertation, I'm aware that I've been speaking for 20 minutes already. Dissertation was really cool because some people would do a topic that their supervisor, like if they're in a group like I was, their supervisor was already doing research on this topic, and he then, or whoever, then decided that their students would sort of build on that and create more data on it, etc. For my dissertation, I won't go into it too much, but it was a group project. So we did the same study, but then our results and the intervention was the same. I basically did a mindfulness intervention, which my dissertation supervisor led because he was a mindfulness practitioner. I was really interested in mindfulness already, but this was another reason why I wanted to do that. It was a 4-week intervention, and we all had different topics that we wanted to look at. So I looked at the effect of the 4-week mindfulness based attention program, it was called, on depression and rumination. And so yeah, I won't go into that too much, but if you wanted to have a separate video on that, I'm more than happy to talk about that. But the dissertation was obviously a big part of the degree, and that coincided with doing those other modules. You would also, quite interesting, would have to, through the research methods module that I spoke about before, there would be a 10% participation within that, where you would have to take part in other people's studies for 10% of the grade. So that was really cool. You could do that in person, you could do that online, but it was a nice way as well. Having a little look at what people's existing studies look like, and getting an idea of what you wanted yours to look like, and the process in that, the questionnaires that you're filling out, etc, etc. Moving on now to the psychotherapy degree. How does it differ? Well, I think just by talking about what it's like, which I know I've done a bit before, but by talking about what it's like, you can probably draw the comparisons anyway. But the psychotherapy degree was essentially, well, it is essentially, because it's what I do at the moment, much more practical, it's very different. I think that's the main emphasis. It's very different to a psychology degree. The psychotherapy degree is very hands-on. So far, how it looks is we'll have a lecture on, say, humanistic psychotherapy, or psychodynamic therapy, or CBT, things like that, based on some reading we've done, and just getting a good idea on the day of the sort of things around that. And then we do a skills practice, which is where you practice being the therapist or the client. You use some of the techniques that you would have just learned in the lecture, thinking about the kind of style that you're going to be doing based on the different lectures, and then also thinking more generally about using the skills such as active listening, non-verbal cues, reflecting, paraphrasing, summarising, these kind of things. And so yeah, you'll build up from, at least on my course, from doing 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 minutes to 20 minutes of being the therapist, and building up from a blank screen of saying and doing nothing to then nodding and these non-verbal cues to then introducing, sort of like reflecting a word or phrase back to them, paraphrasing things that they've said and summarising things that they said. So slowly introducing more and more therapeutic techniques, and as the client, so we all are the client as well, like we all kind of take it in turns throughout the weeks and across the weeks, and the client will talk about whatever they want. This can be about just their real life, real issues, work, mental health, etc. And then after that we'll do a professional personal development, which is we're split into 2 groups, and the group stays the same each week, whereas the skills practice doesn't necessarily. But personal professional development is a safe space for you to talk about the day at uni, basically a nice way to end the course day and leave anything that's sort of been bothering you there, and openly discuss these things with your course mates, and discuss anything really. It's a very open group, but it's a good way of communicating, and talking about whatever you want with this smaller, more intimate group of course mates. And then this term we're looking at, I believe, psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, these sort of things. And as far as I'm aware, instead of the normal therapy, like skills practice we've been doing, this term we will be doing the couch. So the client sits on the couch, and at least initially, I'm not too sure how long this will go on for, but at least initially, the therapist won't say anything. I think the therapist is maybe not in sight of the client, which is quite interesting. Yeah, that's a very brief summary of psychotherapy, because I know it's gone on for a long time. But the main difference is, well, that you can kind of tell, but to summarise, the main differences would be psychology going to be very research heavy. At least on my course, there was no placement. There's no actually practically engaging with the kind of theory that you're learning. You'll be doing, there will be this kind of overarching theme of research, and what you're doing will be leading towards you being able to create your own research for the dissertation. And I think in mind is that people will then go on to do the doctorate at some point, or they'll look into becoming a psychologist, and more research based, more interventions and diagnosis, whereas the psychotherapy is looking more at this hands-on, person-centered, actually being the therapist, and still learning about the theory, of course, but with the main sort of thing being you're actually going to be sitting down practicing the techniques that you've learned, and you're looking at, I suppose you're looking at interventions, but more from the sense of therapeutic modalities, and the intervention is the therapy. We're not looking at all of the theories that psychology does. We're not looking at statistics, and yeah, we're just looking at how these theories and how these types of therapy can be applied directly into therapy. And then, I know, so I wouldn't really go on to it, but then we'll be doing placements, so that could be placements in healthcare settings, in, I suppose, prisons and things like that, which would be really interesting. I'd quite like to do that. and then actually having your own clients, like a few clients, and starting to build up your own private practice, and building up those clinical hours. So yeah, that's sort of that. I think that will hopefully give you a good overview, and also sort of, yeah, just help you figure out which one you want to do. I'm doing the psychotherapy degree, having done the psychology degree. I will say that having done the psychology degree, I understand that it wasn't essential. In fact, most people on my course haven't done a psychology degree, and in a way that's kind of good, but at the same time I think that it has been really beneficial to do that degree, to have a general idea of clinical psychology of mental health, of the interventions that are used, and the way that theory is used in different ways in different settings, and essentially the research behind what I'm then applying into these sessions. But I don't think it is essential. I think a lot of people are absolutely fine not doing psychology before psychotherapy, but I think it's a good idea to kind of, if you're watching this, weigh up where you want to go and with psychology, because there are obviously overlaps, and whether you want to go more into the research and more into diagnosing, interventions, sorry, it's very slippery again, interventions, and yeah, that kind of thing, which a psychologist would do, or you want to, as well as actually doing a sit down with clients, but or you want to be more like psychotherapy and the therapist, which is essentially always working with the clients in therapy with your different types of therapy that you've learned throughout. And eventually I'll be doing integrative, so implementing different types of therapy, so like CBT, psychodynamic, humanistic, etc. And yeah, which one sort of resonates with you the most, and yeah, you might end up doing a psychology degree and then a psychotherapy degree like myself. I know this has been very long and convoluted, and I hope it's been useful in some ways and can help you. I hope you have a lovely day, and if you've got any questions and want any more detail on any of the modules, on the career paths, I'm still trying to understand that. As you can tell, I'm trying to explain what psychology does because there's a lot of overlap, but I kind of want to understand that better so that I can explain that in the video. Yeah, I hope you have a lovely day, everyone. It's the weekend soon, weekend tomorrow, so yeah, have a good day.